Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Hoosier Football Tailgate right here on the Believe Network. I am the coach, Shannon Griffith, and I appreciate you joining me here this evening as we get ready to talk some spring football. And it's hard to believe that that's upon us here starting this Saturday. They had Pro Day this week, the NFL Combine this past weekend where C.J. West and Curtis Rourke were a part of and did quite well and helped themselves with their presence there at the Combine, and then add to it everything that has culminated since the end of the signing day here in February, where we've added 42 scholarship newcomers. That would be the 2025 class, as well as those that were in the portal. We'll talk a little bit more about those here in a minute, but want to first recognize our sponsorships here this evening. Bet Online is the world's most talented and trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or just a first-time bettor, Bet Online is the ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from the NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC. Bet Online continues to be your number one sports betting source. For every three-pointer to a hat trick, Bet Online has you covered with the odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. Bet Online, the game starts here. And also want to thank Quick Cut Sports Video for their sponsorship of the Hoosier Football Tailgate. I've utilized their video software and analytics to break down film, whether it be the offseason like we did last week when we talked about the RPO game, or whether I'm doing it for my own simple study from that standpoint and preparing myself for games that the Hoosiers will play next season. And we utilize it quite a bit in season. So appreciate Quick Cut Sports for their sponsorship of the Hoosier Football Tailgate. And one more thing back to Bet Online. Remember now, we've got all the tournaments getting ready to start here. The women's Big Ten has started. The men's Big Ten will start next week at some point. Indiana has one more game against the Ohio State Buckeyes at home. A big critical game for the Hoosiers on hopefully taking one step closer to getting in the NCAA tournament, but that will all be to determine as they have not only Ohio State, but then they venture into the Big Ten tournament where they can also help solidify their position in the field of 64. But tonight, we want to focus in on what is in front of us and the Indiana Hoosiers. Like I said, spring ball starts this Saturday, and everything from standpoint of what is happening as it pertains to the camp, as well as the practices and everything, all that will be a to be determined aspect in terms of which days, because they haven't released all the days as of yet, as when it pertains to their schedule throughout the rest of the weeks. Only other date that has been released is April 19th, being the spring game, a noon Saturday afternoon scrimmage. Now, I've heard rumors from our good buddy Jim Coyle from Indiana Sports Beat Radio that may be moving to a potential Thursday night. Now, I have not heard that, so I do not want to speculate on all that, but make sure you're double checking that. And then there'll maybe be 1 or 2 dates of spring practice that is open to the public, but we just don't know which ones those are. I'm speculating with a Saturday start, they'll probably go Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday as their days, and maybe mix a Friday or a Sunday into the equation. We'll have to wait and see. Sig is one of those guys that will not necessarily use all the available dates. He's not one of those guys that gets too fired up if they make all their dates for spring practice and such. So that's just something that he's pretty good at in terms of making sure they're getting what they need to get done in the time allotted. And it seems like they've been able to do that here over, especially like last year. And what a year difference it makes as we sit here now going into year 2, a little bit more informed of what to expect. From the coach's standpoint, they're well grounded into the Indiana program, as well as the kids in terms of their setup and their daily routine. So everything from that standpoint is running smoothly and a lot more comfortable heading into this spring as opposed to last year where everything was kind of rushed and all the different question marks that we'll talk about heading into spring. But last year there was a ton of them in terms of were the portal kids that Coach Signetti had brought in from, JMU and other group of 5 type of schools, were they good enough to play at the Big Ten level? I think that was a resounding yes in terms of who they had on the field and how they did, and they did quite well throughout the year in that regard and those things. So we'll get to that here in a second. First of all, Coach Signetti announced his one-day camps that will be coming to Memorial Stadium there on Indiana's campus. Very important this time of year for this type of camp situation that they have set up. Right now, their big man camp is on Tuesday, June the 3rd, I believe, and then they'll have an elite prospect camp on the 4th. Skills camp there on June the 10th, and another elite prospect camp on June 11th. And these are all important dates because they're top recruits that they are, wanting to evaluate and solidify their recruitability will come out of these camps. All the kids that they've made offers to, regardless of whether they're heading into their senior year or sophomore year or junior year, they're going to highly encourage those guys to get on campus to be evaluated and get to know the coaching staff as well as maybe some of the players, because there'll be some official visits that will come out of this. The days of official visits in terms of how they are set up now as opposed to back when I was coaching, you weren't going to have those until December. When you first got your first round of recruits in. So nowadays, with the way the calendar has changed and recruiting has changed, a lot of recruits that have been offered scholarships will probably make it a weekend and have a official visit, or some may say unofficial, depending on whether they're being reimbursed by the institution or not. And so it will be an important time for the month of June for the coaches and everything that goes into these evaluational camps that they will be having there in the month of June. And that's just their version, as coaches may step out to other camps as well and observe kids if they can. There's some mega camps in the state of Indiana. I think University of Indianapolis has one. And so, but that's kind of the scenario that you got here with these camps coming in and things of that nature. that are on the hopper here, but right before we get started with this first camp season this summer, and Indiana will have all their top kids here. So it'll be an exciting time there that first part of June to get some of these kids, especially the kids that are in that 4-star tier, kids that they may not have had the ability to recruit in years past. And now they're going to get that opportunity to see some of those kids on their campuses. Pro Day was the other day on campus. Excuse me there. That wasn't the one I wanted. There we go. And Coach Signetti tweeted out it was a great success for the Pro Day, not only for the kids that were there to run and do their skill testing for the NFL scouts that were there in person, but also for all the underclassmen and such that go through the Pro Day as well. They get to, do their thing in some respects to audition for the NFL, although they may be a year or two away from that possibility. I do believe that, again, C.J. West turned some heads again, and I heard that Keyshawn Williams helped improve himself in the eyes of some of the NFL scouts with a good scout day. And, Fernando balls outside stuff. So that was a good thing from the standpoint. It gave them a chance to see Fernando throw, and he did quite well, pretty accurate, delivered the ball in time. So things are paying off for him being here and involved. So all around a very big, successful day. And, we've talked about how the strength and conditioning staff are kind of the unsung heroes of any program. And Coach Signetti has one of the best in the country in terms of what they're able to do with their kids in terms of preparing them for the season. Everything that they do from not only the strength side of the coin, but also from flexibility and agilities. So a big tip of the cap has to go to the Hoosier strength and conditioning staff for doing a great job, because they're the ones that are in contact with these kids basically from the latter part of December all the way up through camp, up until, they go, the June and July period where they'll get them again in their one-on-one fashion. One other thing before we keep on going, if you're in one of the chat rooms or YouTube, Facebook, even on X, or you can participate. If you have a question about something, by all means, ask it, and hopefully I'll be smart enough to answer it. But the participational aspect of things, the more that you ask the questions, we'll get more out of it as well, because you may have something that other people are wanting to know as well as we move through this right now. Again, we already know that spring football is going to start this Saturday, March the 8th, and we were very aware that the spring game is set for April the 15th, as we head into the latter part of April there. And I do believe that is a week before Little Five, if my memory serves me correct. It's again, last year, I think, because they got started so late with some things, they had some scheduling situations where they bumped into a lot of things, and therefore they had to adapt, adjust, and improvise because of Little Five and things of that nature. So this year, they are a week before that, and kind of, in some respects, the kickoff to the Little Five week. They're down in Bloomington. But right now, the 19th at noon, which is a Saturday, is the scheduled time and date. Alluded to earlier that there is some rumors that are unsubstantiated that there may be an adjustment to the schedule and potentially moving the spring game to the 18th, but we will wait for word officially out of Hoosier land for that. Very fortunate, because in the world of college football right now, Texas, Nebraska have already canceled their spring game because of the roster tampering they feel that is occurring between the end of spring camp all the way up through to when fall camp starts. And when you have these games televised, it gives opportunities for people to evaluate and see how kids are doing, especially the second-tier kids. And your top 22 are very important, irregardless of how many reps somebody may get. So if somebody comes along and takes one of your top 22, it can cause some issues in your depth and things of that. So Matt Rule in Texas have decided not to have a spring game, and I would imagine there'll probably be more in that result. Now, they may have some type of scrimmage, but it will not be televised or open to the public per se. But it's not going to be your full-fledged spring game that you're normally seeing, especially like at Nebraska, where they get 60, 70,000 to attend that game. And it's a big money day in some respects for those institutions. So we'll have to wait to see about all that. And we'll go from there with some of that and see if, let's get down here to some of the things that wanted to take care of with some of this stuff in terms of spring, and trying to get to my because I don't have, let's see here, that wasn't it. Here we go. There's what I wanted to be. Some 5 questions that, Indiana is going to have to address as they go into spring camp, and the limited number of practices that they have in terms of some position. The quarterback position is probably about the same as it was a year ago. There are some unknowns, but there are some high expectations, because just like last year when Curtis was coming into the situation, he was an experienced starting quarterback that had a great resume, having been MVP of the Mid-American Conference and had done quite well at Ohio U, but he was coming into Indiana without a ACL issue and situation. So it is one of those things that that can cause some problems. Rudy, I give you a free pass. Next time we'll have to do some up downs, 100 yards up downs, which are not fun. But I'm glad you made it here, partner. Appreciate you coming in and being a part of the broadcast each and every week. So appreciate that. And but is Mendoza going to be the guy that they think Mendoza can be? And I'm speaking of Fernando. As far as Alberto Mendoza, his younger brother, it'll be an interesting dynamic, because you have those two that are vying for the coveted spot, as well as the Wilson kid that they got in as well, Grant Wilson, from Old Dominion, I believe I'm correct there. But, is Mendoza going to be the guy like they felt Curtis Rourke was going to be that guy for the season. So it's still a big question mark heading into the year, and if Fernando can be that guy, he has 2 years of eligibility available, and that is huge. It'd have been very nice to have Curtis for 2 years, but the opportunity that's in front of having Fernando for 2 years, and then, of course, his brother sitting in the wings as well, it bodes well for that position if things come to fruition in terms of Fernando's ability heading into the season and staying healthy, of course. Now, they do have some depth problems there because outside of Grant Wilson, who's played a lot of ball there at Old Dominion, then you drop down to a kid that hasn't had any game experience in terms of really under fire experience. And then, of course, Jacob Bell, the true freshman, who is not here on campus. And so you can see that that room could get thin rather quick if you run into some injury problems heading into the season as it is. Offensive linemen, again, it will be vitally important to come out of there with their 5 top guys. There's no question that Carter Smith is back with, one position that you feel it's pretty well shored up. And, of course, Pat Coogan from Notre Dame, the transfer, the offensive center, 6'5", big body type. Those are going to be 2 of the big guys there. And then, you got Drew Evans and Bray and some other guys that Indiana, for the longest time, was always an issue at offensive line, with number 1 getting a solid 5 out on the field, but then having some backups that were also in that top 7 or 8 guys that provided the depth they needed to be that solid group of offensive linemen. And Indiana this year, I thought they pretty much had that, although there was some deficiencies when they had some injuries that caused the drop off, but you really couldn't say that the offensive line was a problem this year. Now, when they went up against a more talented front 4 or front 3 like Ohio State and Notre Dame for that matter, they had problems, and most of that was physical. So that's where they've got to get beyond when you come up against talented teams, Ohio State, Michigan, then you had Notre Dame. This year they're going to have Penn State and Oregon. And then add to that mix Iowa, who always has a very stout defense. And you can see that they're going to have a pretty good challenge heading into the year, not even to mention Illinois, who's a team that figures to be vying for a playoff spot this year under Brett Bielema, as they as well will have some talented kids coming back for this season. So coming out of spring and having that top 5 and, the backups that you are going to, count on will become vitally important. The fact that you have some of these true first-year players that are in right now and are going to participate this spring, that is huge, because there may be some guys out of that group that may be in a top, 2 deep when it's all said and done. They're going to have a pretty good sized roster to going through spring. You had 41 players from the transfer portal and the 14 first years that are here and enrolled to a group of, 60 bodies or so that are here, you can see they're going to have a pretty good sized number of kids out in camp this year for spring ball. So, but it will be vitally important as well to have those questions answered coming out of spring practice, that you feel confident with your top five and you have confidence in what you have there in the backup positions heading into fall camp. And of course, staying away from injury is always vitally important to the cause, as everyone knows. So again, that'll be a vitally important aspect as well. Another interesting room will be the running back and wide receiver room. We're going to talk about some specific names here shortly, but you got Black, who's coming back. You got Hemby coming in from Maryland, as well as BB coming in from, Alabama, Birmingham, I believe, coming in, and he's a talented kid. Black, of course, we know what he can do. Pretty strong kid, decent speed. He's one of those guys that can get you the tough five. Hemby, I think, gives you the well-rounded running back, as he displayed that at Maryland a year ago. And then, of course, in the wide receiver room, having Surratt back is huge. E.J. Williams coming back into the fold after topsy-turvy 2024 for him. And but he's can be an important weapon to utilize because he has the size. And one thing you can't coach is size, and he's got it. So you've got those two in there, and then a kid, Tyler Morris. Well, again, we'll talk more about the name specifically, but what they got to do, it's kind of similar coming out with the offensive linemen, is that rotational aspect. Who are your top three running backs? Who are your top 6, 7 wide receivers that are going to figure into a rotation? Last year, I thought this was a very solid 2 groups for Indiana. Running back, they got it down to the top 2, as we know. But they were probably at least 4 deep in the equation, but they whittled it down to the top 2 guys as they really got going in the year. Wide receiver wise, same thing. Very good units that were very well figured out in terms of utilization and things of that magnitude. So can they come out with that same feeling that those 2 positions are really solid for them and looking to find ways to get the ball in the hands of their playmakers, and how that will be accomplished not only in the run game but in the passing game as well. So pretty excited about that room. I do think that room is those 2 rooms are top tiered in terms of the talent that Indiana has there. And if there's one thing about winning football, you have to be able to run the football, especially in critical times, so that when you are in that short yardage situation, you have something to hang your hat on in terms of a play, but also the guy that's going to get you the tough yards when everybody's up there and plugging up the gaps and such, that you've got somebody that can fight through it and get those hard yardages that result in first downs and keeps the chains moving. But I do think Indiana has that on both the running back room and the wide receiver room. And one thing for sure, those 2 position groups are not going to sneak up on anybody in the Big Ten this year because of what they were able to put on film a year ago with everything. So that group is really, really well positioned to have another great year in there. Then you look at the secondary. Who outside of Pons is going to be there? Now, getting more back from Ole Miss was a really good surprise in some respects, just like getting Khalil Benson back from Colorado. But right now they got to figure out, who is going to accommodate Pons, and we're going to talk about that in here in a second, because I do believe not only do they have that those individuals that they can throw out there. But I do think in some respects, their secondary is going to be as good as last year's group, if not better. So I do think that will be a very solid group that they will be able to come out of spring camp feeling quite good about that position group. And remember a year ago, they were still looking. They felt short at that in those positions in the secondary. So I do think they're at the spot they need to be with everything from that standpoint to get themselves in a position to have a good, solid group of guys to choose from when it comes to that, as well with some of their specialist positions. So all those things I do believe are good for Indiana. And one thing I want to look at now here is kind of a simulated depth chart, if you want to say that. Bite-sized Bison, who we've had on before, does a great job with analytics. He has put together some of these depth charts that he has available on his website there, bitesizebison.com, and form of Google Docs. So he's got not only a depth chart of, what he kind of sees, as well as the scholarship breakdown on who, what year do they have, scholarships in from their, whether it be first year players all the way up through the guys that are coming in for the portal. So great information there. If you want to take a look, he does a great job with it and everything. But, as you can see here right now, offensively speaking, you got Mendoza and Grant Wilson, then of course Alberto being the true second-year player now, gonna feel more comfortable in the huddle. And if anything that he has on both of these guys is he's been in the system for 1 year, so he's very acclimated to what Shanahan is expecting. Now Whitmore coming in as the new quarterback coach, he's gonna have some new things to learn and such, but he'll add to that dynamic as in the passing game and such. But a good group on paper. Of course, Fernando coming in from Cal, where he kind of battled his way into a starter there. I do think he went out as a true walk-on and found a way to get himself on the field, didn't let the obstacles get him down, didn't look for the easy way out. He met all the challenges head on and then found a way to get on the field, and he produced. And, his situation there has enabled him to be a very coveted kid out of the portal this past year that Indiana was able to come away with his commitment. So that's a huge win there. Grant Wilson, of course, played against Coach Signetti and Coach Haynes from the conference when they were in there at James Madison. I believe he had his best passing game of that year, which was 2 years ago against JMU. But so there's familiarity there with him as a player, as a quarterback. Battled some injuries, I think, last year a little bit, but I do believe they feel that he provides that depth from an age standpoint, a little bit more mature, able to handle the system if called upon, things of that nature. But I do believe Alberto will get a pretty good look this spring, being that it's his second year, to see how he matches up in this equation. And although Fernando is the heir apparent, well, first and foremost, putting it on paper doesn't mean it's true, and he'll have to do his job of producing. Then at the running back position, which we just talked about, Hemby, BB, and Black probably are the top three. And again, I think they are really good, talented players that add to a room that graduated their top two. And therefore, these two kind of can step right in and keep things rolling. Him be of course, that, what we've seen on tape from him at Maryland, very capable running back. Wide receiver, just talk about. You got Omar Cooper, Surratt coming back. Those are the two big guys that, and EJ blend to that room with experience. Omar having a great year last year in what you would call more of the second rotation, but he made plays when called upon and had a great year. And then you've got Mekhi Jackson and Tyler Morris coming in. Mekhi is from Appalachian State, where he was their top guy. He'll figure a way to be on the field. Tyler coming in from Michigan. So I do believe he'll add to the wide receiver room with speed as well. And then some of the younger guys out there, true freshman, Charlie Becker, be interesting to see how he adds up into this. And then Chandler and Bond are both guys that, again, may be youngsters, but may be able to find a way into a rotation. And it will be important to come out of spring ball with that in mind, that you have guys that that you can identify and put yourself in a position where you got these guys ready to go, and you come out of there with everything full speed ahead for fall camp. And why they've got 3 guys returning that are really good, and I think are playmakers. You're going to have some more at that position as well. Tight end, when you look at it, they took 2 in the portal. States, who was at Tennessee last year via Notre Dame, so he's gone to 2 different schools. And then Riley Nowitzki is the young man from Wisconsin, who was more of a blocking tight end, very similar to what Indiana would like to do with Horton as well. We'll have to see how they mold the offense out of their tight end, because Horton was such a really good player where he could be attached, unattached, spread out wide, and he gave you that big body to go to and a great perimeter blocker as well. So we'll see what those guys have to offer this springs. And then, of course, James Bamba, who has been the young man that's kind of been a backup for his entire career, has done a good job when called upon to add meaningful snaps. And I do believe, again, he'll have that opportunity, and has really done a great job being in that traditional backup role for the last several years. Getting into the offensive line now, again, Carter Smith is back. You got Lynch and Drew Evans back. We'll have to see with Khalil Benson and Mikowski how that plays out. Now, the different shades are the number of snaps that these players have gotten in their career, either at Indiana or other schools. I think the lightest shade is like 400 plus snaps, and then the darker shade is 800 plus snaps. And as you can see, the young man from Ohio State, Zinn, has no traditional snaps that are above 400 or more, because he's been in a true backup role since he's been at Ohio State. And so he is coming in, even though he's an older guy that may have had some playing time here and there, maybe in mop-up roles, now is going to be stepped to the forefront for him to get meaningful snaps from him at the right tackle position. Lynch being back is huge. Adds again to that front 5. Of course, Carter Smith is a really good offensive lineman. Moves over to that left tackle spot, which is vitally important for right-handed quarterbacks. Evans kind of is that utility guy And then you've got the Barrett and Wilkin are two true freshmen that are in and on campus. So it'll be interesting to see how they fall into the equation, as are some of these other young men on campus for fall, spring ball. So offensive line, again, solidify your top five and your two deep so that you come out of camp knowing who you got and those guys that are in the coveted backup roles, guys that can play multiple positions, some that will be able to play center if needed. So right now, I think it's a pretty good front five, but you can see the depth is going to be the one thing that they got to come out of spring with. So offensively speaking, pretty solid there. Flipping over to defense, getting Kamara back, huge. That was a huge get. That when he announced that he was coming back, because he was such a dominant player for Indiana a year ago, and he really, really was the juice that he brought to every snap on defense last year. So that huge having him back. Then you get into two portal kids, Hosa Wheeler, who is from, I think he's coming from Western Kentucky, where he had a pretty good run there and their scheme and system. And then the Ratcliffe kid, I'm not quite sure where he's from. Let me look real quick because it's escaping me right now. Oh, he's from Texas State. So he's coming from one of those group of five school as well, like Wheeler is. So right now in the defensive line, solid with Kamara, and then you're going to have to find with Burris and Tucker with some experience that they have, but a position where you got the possibility of young bucks coming in and earning an opportunity to get on the field in that two deep. So again, I know it's kind of beating a dead horse here, but having those 14, 15 first-year players enrolled in school right now is huge. And it's huge for not only them, but the coaches and the evaluation standpoint. This is a position, again, like last year, how they got CJ West, that I wouldn't be a bit surprised if they looked for the potential D lineman, especially one that comes with, some true experience like CJ West did last year. So that is kind of a wait and see. I'm also excited to see how the Javarius, I think it's Hall, freshman young man, that I'm anxious to see how he handles this spring as well. And then you got Collins there with Daniel at the stud position. Then you get to Aiden Fisher, another big-time gentleman that decided to come back and lead the troops again for one more year. I'm sure Brian Haynes did a couple backflips and all when that was announced and figured that he was coming back. Hardy is a really good player. I think he had a pick six against I think it was Western Illinois, but solid player, had some solid minutes. Going to be very hard to replace Walker just because Walker was such a fiery stud type of guy that really played at 100 miles an hour. But Hardy's a good player. You got Turner, and we'll see about Isaiah Jones and all that. But I do think the linebacker core is pretty good with their first two. Maybe depth will be another possibility of a spring portal addition if they can find a real good one that may come in and compete, against Hardy or whoever that person may be. But Aiden Fisher and Kamara, like those two kids were huge guys that they announced coming back for this year were huge. So then you head into the secondary. As you can see there, D'Angelo is the one stud returning at corner, and enjoying him for one more year because I do believe this will be his last year when it's all said and done. Then you've got the other corner, Gandy, who came in from Pitt, and he's a really good cover corner. So they do have two solid cover corners in all this coming in to this season, and stay healthy. And those two guys can be a big help to what Coach Haynes likes to run, where they put those guys pretty much on an island and lock them up one-on-one so that they can have their exotic packages and stuff and be able to get their safeties involved in defending the run in that regard. But Gandy from Pitt, really good player. Knighton is the young man from Northern Illinois, famously made the pick that solidified their victory over Notre Dame last year. Be really interested to see where he is coming from. Boykin, he is from, I believe, North Carolina State. So another young man has experience. And then, of course, you have Moore and Farrell back in the secondary. And as you can see, all those positions have had significant snaps at the D1 level, and for the most part, Power 5 level. And getting Lewis Moore, it was a huge get because they needed somebody to replace in that position, and him coming back into the fold, huge. I think a year before he went to Mississippi, he was all Big Ten, if I'm not mistaken. So good to get him back. Of course, Knighton, good as well. And then, of course, Sharpie, Jamari is a good backup. And then, again, some young bucks that we'll have to look at here in a second. But Bonds and Boyd and Baldwin are all guys that they're very, very high on in a lot of respects. So a pretty big group there. And then in the kicking arena, of course, having Nico coming back is huge. He had a really good year. McCarthy as a punter, as a kid, I believe, is actually from Australia, if I'm not mistaken. So that's an interesting dynamic. But Solomon Van Horst is a really good returner. And then you got the possibility of putting Morris back there in punt return situations and kickoff return situations. So all that good from that standpoint. And as you can see, red indicates portal guys, and then the career snaps. The darker ones were 1,300 plus snaps. Lighter shade was 800, and a really lighter shade is only 400 plus. So Bite-Sized Bison for that does a great job of keeping it up to date. You get an idea of probably how maybe these guys are going to be situated coming into the year. But I think that's a pretty good guesstimation of their depth chart for next season and all of that. So I do think from that standpoint, it looks like it's going to be a pretty good year for what they have coming back and the success they had last year. And those guys that were a part of it now can be that calming force on offense and defense. And then, of course, you've got some young kids that may be a big part of this season and this group of players in terms of adding the depth necessary with everything. Okay. Now I got to find my last segment here if I can. And that's going to be the biggest thing is, can I find it? Because sometimes I find things that weren't where they're supposed to be. And now we get going with everything and I've misplaced it somewhere, which is not unlikely with me. So bear with me here because we got some names that, to identify in all this. And I thought I had. Let's see if we can create it real quick. With everything. So bear with me as we go through here. Any questions that you guys have, by all means, throw it up in the chat box that we can address if needed. If you have questions about spring ball or what may or may not be happening with some players and such, but I do think Indiana's in pretty good shape heading into spring ball with this group of players. That they're going to have some guys that replace a group of players and add some more to it than they had even last year at these positions. I do think they've got some really talented players to add into the equations, and I think it's going to be good to know some of the names popping up for the spring that you may notice happens with interviews and stuff. Now, as we know, Sig is not one to say too much when it comes to that and spring ball and stuff. So let's see if I can get this going correctly. Oh, maybe not. Oh, there we go. Couldn't find it. Now we've got too many of them. All right. Well, we talked about this young man already. Let's see here. Let's see. All right. Rudy wants to know Indiana's base defense of 3-4. Yes, it is based on the 3-4, Rudy. 3 down and then 2 inside backers and then kind of a nickel package in the back end with a rover that they have that can be a force in the run game, but also in the pass game. So Indiana's very pleased with that. And the 3-4, again, gives them the ability to get some speed on the field, be able to go from a 3-man front to a 4-man front. They use the stud position as a guy that's kind of the hybrid linebacker / defensive end, a rush type of guy. But it also allows them, like I said, to get in a 3-man front and do some of the things they like to do as it pertains to their blitz package and different exotics. Or they can jump in a traditional 4-2 look, kind of like the old 4-2-5 that Indiana ran under Tom Allen, with how they have their personnel. So they do have a lot of flexibility in what they do in that respect. So, but as we know here, and we've seen, again, Holden States as the tight end. Again, I'll be interested to see his progress from not only coming out of the winter months into the spring, but how that translates to the field. He's a gentleman that can be utilized in the passing game, but he's also done well at the point of attack. But him and, of course, then of course, Riley, the young man Nowaski, I believe that's how you say that name, who's coming in from Wisconsin. He was more of Wisconsin's blocking tight end, or that's how they utilized him. But the word is he does have pretty good hands and is good enough to spread out and run routes. So two good tight ends that need to follow up during the spring and to give you something to talk about or listen to when coach is talking and being interviewed to see how those two young men are progressing. Again, Coogan is, again, a name that is going to be vitally important to Indiana's offensive line success. Does he come in here and be the leader that he was at Notre Dame? I believe he can be, and provide that stability that they need there. And having graduated guys not only at that position but other positions along the offensive line, here's a young man that played in the national championship games, so that gives him credibility. But more importantly, being a leader like he was at Notre Dame, I think just translates into him falling into that position here. But big size, 6'5"-ish, big offensive lineman, especially at center for Indiana, something we haven't seen in a while. And then you got Benson coming back again. The whole thing with him is going to be he provides you with some flexibility because he's played guard, he's played some tackle, and I probably would say he's probably better inside at guard. I think at tackle he gets exposed a little bit. Now, I do think he's a good player. I don't think he was a great player the year he was here. His availability coming back from Colorado doesn't necessarily speak well in terms of, what Colorado thought of him as a potential starter for them. But because they have some relationship with him, they know what they're getting. He's a good kid. And again, that strength staff may do wonders with him and put him in a position to really open people's eyes. So he's a guy to keep an eye on as well. And then the big fella that's coming in from Ohio State, Zen, he is a big dude. And it'll be interesting to see how he stacks up coming in from Ohio State. Has not played a lot of meaningful minutes there. Battled some injuries again this past year, but his size is something you can't teach. And the fact that he went to Ohio State right out of high school, I think bodes well that Indiana's getting a pretty good offensive lineman that is going to add some firepower to their offensive line. So I think that is some of the offensive line / tight ends to keep aware of as we head into this spring. Moving into quarterback position, again, we've talked about Fernando and what he brings to the table. Grant Wilson, again, his play there at Old Dominion. I think he's going to be a quality backup, but as well add to the competition in the room because he's a pretty good quarterback as well. So, again, you got to have competition, especially at quarterback. It'll make that room so much better. And I think that was pretty much the case this past year when you had Taven and Curtis in the room, and then you had two young pups with Tyler Cherry and Alberto ready and breathing down your neck. Now, we know Tyler Cherry's situation. He had a bad knee injury that happened the week of Notre Dame. And there was quite a bit of speculation that he was not going to be healthy come the start of camp. And so with the new rules and stuff, he's essentially off the roster per se. And I think going to fulfill a role as a student coach or something until he is capable of getting himself in a healthy position, which will probably be next spring, which will be an important spring for him as well. Having to miss this year, I think hurts from his development standpoint, but with the new rules and such, you got to have healthy bodies on that roster, because if you don't, it's a problem, because you're not going to get somebody to sub in for that position. So that is why he is not going to be proudly listed on any depth chart or any roster this year, because he's moving into that injury status that you see in the NFL, what they call unable to compete or something. But again, quarterback position has great I think there's some great talent there in competition. We'll see what all happens, but I think everybody's in agreement that Fernando is the guy they want to be the guy leading Indiana on the field week one. We've talked about, again, what they got and get from him, a talented kid with maybe some more upside potential in terms of speed, still a big kid. And then Lee Beebe, another one coming in from UAB, again, over 800 yards this past year there, and more of a in the Justice Ellison mode, more of a flashy type of guy. But, again, some talented people coming into that running back position solidifies that position as one of the top tiered positions on Indiana's roster and depth chart. So excited about them. And then wide receiver wise, Tyler Morris, the kid from Michigan, has some speed. I had some video of him catching a pass in the Rose Bowl against Alabama. He got the first touchdown of that game and running a crossing route, and you see some of his speed. So I'm excited to see how that adds up for Indiana. We talked about Jackson as well, wide receiver spot. Again, a kid did really well at App State, and a good-sized kid as well. So those are the predominant two there to keep an eye on as we go through spring. Hosa Willer, again, we talked about him, what he brings to up front from Western Kentucky. A little bit like CJ in that build and structure. But I do look for him to add a big piece to that equation up front, as does Dominic Ratcliffe from Texas State. He has some get up and some versatility and speed. So I'm anxious to see him as well, how he progresses through spring camp and how they feel about those two guys heading into the summer season overall. Let's see, Rudy asked, are gray shirts still a thing? No, they are not. I do believe they're still going to use the category of a red shirt, but there is talk about even eliminating that and saying each kid has 5 years of eligibility to play 4. So they're gradually going to get away from the red shirt, medical red shirt, and things of that nature. So no, there's no more gray shirting in practice or theory right now. But again, some rules that we're going to all have to brush up on as we head into the season. Gandy, we talked about him and what he brings to the table. Again, a kid that can go out and play on an island. I do think he's somebody that fits well into the scheme that Coach Haynes likes to run, especially in the secondary. Again, Knighton coming in from Northern Illinois. I'm anxious to see how he stacks up. Again, he had the big interception against Notre Dame last year that kind of turned the lights out on Notre Dame, and Northern Illinois getting a big win over Notre Dame early last year. But anxious to see this young man and how he progresses, as I am with Boykin, big body kid, good kid that can play in space, good rover type, potentially free type, but anxious to see him and what he brings to the table. And then, of course, Moore coming back is huge. Coming back from Mississippi, we talked about that. And then some of the younger guys coming in, first years, Brian Baldwin, that's the young man out of Baltimore, Maryland. I want to say he was a 4-star recruit. So I'm anxious to see him stack up in that secondary. And then some young kids up in the trenches. Baylor Wilkin, kid out of Van Buren, Ohio, true freshman. See how he perhaps adds some depth, and maybe he's a part of the 2 deep as they head into the summer session as well as into camp. Big size kid, moves well, pretty strong. We'll see if he's in a position to add the depth factor in everything. And then on the defensive line, Calhoun and Javarius Hall are 2 kids that anxious to see how they prepare and find themselves in a position to add to the depth of the D line. And then, of course, Wilkin on the O-line. So some names to keep you familiar with as we head into spring practice, as they go along. Double check with Bite-Sized Bison on the depth charts as well as scholarship, how that is all spread out. He does a great job with all those type of data points. And again, stay tuned right here. We'll have as much as we can bring to the table. I know Coach Haynes, World's finalist, very excited about this group. Thinks he has a little bit more than he did a year ago in terms of the back half. Still a little concerned with the depth up front, but does think they have some dudes coming that could potentially add themselves into a rotational type of deal. So defensively, I think they feel pretty darn good, even though they lost Walker from last year, Carr, some of these guys that played very meaningful minutes, but have now graduated and potentially looking for the opportunities in the NFL. And like I said, I know CJ West had a really good pro day down at the Combine. I believe he ran sub 540s, which is moving for a big fella. And I think he improved his chances of being drafted. And of course, I do believe Curtis, even though he's limited in what he can display, I think what he has on film, the story about playing with a bad ACL or torn ACL, all adds up to teams looking at him in a positive light. And I do think he's a potential late mid-round draft pick, if I had to say it. But I wouldn't be surprised if these guys come out and they're undrafted free agents, because what do I know in all of this? But stick right here to the Hoosier Football Tailgate. We'll keep you updated as much as we can. I appreciate you joining me here this evening. We're going to see you next time to talk a little bit more about spring and some of the things that Indiana did offensively that gave them the best chance of winning last year. And we'll break that down at our next opportunity to come to you. But for now, I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith. You've been watching the Hoosier Football Tailgate right here on Believe.